June 12th, 2023 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board to order. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. Each vote will be taken by roll call. Please note that this meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel.
We need a roll call of the board.
Yes, and everyone, we have to check now for who can hear and be heard.
All right. Mr. Robbins.
Present.
I am present. Mr. Davison.
Present.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Present.
And Mr. Hassinger.
I'm here. Okay. I guess that we don't necessarily have to ask. Oh, everybody, our staff and whatnot is part of it.
Yep. Staff Moore. Fiona Coughlin.
Present.
And Natalia Alward is on the call.
Present.
You're there? Okay. It actually says everyone in the law, but I don't know how to do that. I was just at the CMRPC annual meeting, which had about 100 and some people, many in the room, but some on the wire.
And everyone on the wire had to roll call in.
No, they didn't. And I think they did something with adjourn to avoid that problem. Okay, we'll start with our usual first item, which is public input. At this point, if anyone has anything they'd like to talk to us about within our scope that is not on tonight's agenda, this is the time for that. Is there anyone? Apparently not.
No hands raised on Zoom.
All right. Number one, 2A. Lot release, reapproval, lots 1 and 16 of Abbey Woods subdivision. Fiona.
Yes, I'll pull this up. So this is a request to release lots 1 and 10R. They are using the standardized form. Essentially, they want to, the way that the verbiage was the first time, they want to confirm that it's released from the covenant. So they want to resubmit this request for release of lots for their records so they can pursue their purchase and sale for, specifically lot 10R, but lot 1 as well. So, confirmed that, the language council did not review this language, but council did not need to because it's the standardized form that we use. Happy to answer any other questions from the board.
Are there any questions from the board? Any, you have to speak up, Prabhu, when you need something, because the rest of us are looking here. Anybody else that wants to comment on this? If not, do we have a motion?
Move that the board approve the lot release as requested.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I'll vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. B, approval of surety estimate for Abbey Woods subdivision.
So related to the same project, we did need to get an updated engineer's opinion on their construction cost estimate. So this is just standard procedure. We requested a quote from our contact Jeff Walsh at Graves Engineering. And this, he did his typical analysis and submitted for approval. The estimates are based on, as we said, Abbeywood subdivision, in North Grafton, and the final estimate cost, I will scroll down to. It's 5 pages, so apologies. This is the final cost here. Happy to answer any other questions. This is, again, one of the kind of typical procedures that the developer will request and we revisit as part of the subdivision planning process. So happy to talk more to this, or if any questions from the public, happy to answer those.
Any questions?
Just to clarify, this reflects a reduced surety amount to cover the remaining work.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
As some work has been completed there.
Correct. Yes.
The
Sorry,
remaining work and a minimum reserve
With a reserve,
reset.
yes.
And not a question, just highlighting that there's a 20% contingency included
That's what
in the estimate.
Yep.
That's what I'm referencing, yes. Oh, and welcome to our new member, by the way. Just by the way. Thank you for coming forward, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay. So, anyone? If not, roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Technicality, was there actually a motion made?
No, there wasn't.
Consider it made.
I'll hold off here of taking a vote until I have something to vote on.
Consider the motion made.
And second. And I was assuming my memory was wrong. Let's start. Anyway, Mr. Robbins.
It's a fading.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. The motion carries. Approval of subdivision control not required, 9 and 11 Adams Road.
So, hold on. So this is the link to the application. I will just give a brief overview. I had been corresponding with the applicant for this A&R. They submitted their application on June 5th, appearing before the board obviously today. The applicant is requesting to convey parcel A to lot 1. So let's see if I can get this. Parcel A here will be going to lot 1, 11 Adams Road. And parcel B will be going to lot 2. I'm sorry, parcel B will be going to lot 2 here, 9 Adams Road. Sorry, there's an AutoCAD pop-up that comes up, but hopefully that's clear for the board. Both parcels are not buildable. I had, as I mentioned, corresponded with the applicant to review based on section 3.1.3 of the subdivision rules and regulations. There was initial concern about some administrative things, kind of minor things more than anything, conformance with setbacks and confirming that the nonconformity is not going to be exacerbated from the switch, which ended up being fine. It actually helps remediate the issue. There is a variance on a variance for 11 Adams Road for the frontage requirements. So the frontage here is indeed correct and does not comply. That was from, I believe, 1990. So just so the board is aware of that, that sometimes will be well, of course, with an A&R, a red flag. Other than that, it was really kind of more minor things, and all of my concerns in terms of my review and the planning department's review were assuaged. I did try and retrieve some septic as-built for the applicant and well locations, just to try and note that on the plan. We were able to retrieve that, and I did send it to them. So yeah, I think that's basically the long and short of it. Other items discussed, as I mentioned, was the setback here was a slight concern, but upon clarification that it's conforms to 15 feet, we are all set. So I am happy to answer any other questions from the board, but in terms of Mass General Law compliance, this application did not have any red flags to me.
Any questions, any discussions?
So,
I had a question, Bob.
Yes, go
Can you
ahead.
hear me? So, Fiona, when you say it doesn't conform with the frontage requirements,
Yes.
conform with the frontage requirements, can you clarify that? And then you said there are no red herrings on this.
Yes, good question, Prabhu. The minimum frontage in this zone is 140 feet, but you'll see here, it's kind of small. Let me zoom in. You'll see here that the frontage for 11 Adams is 102 feet. So, but they have a variance on the property that's recorded in the Worcester Registry of Deeds that I outlined in my memo as well, the reference number, the book and page. So, frontage is obviously one of the primary things the board's going to look at when they review an A&R. So I wanted to just make sure that the board was aware that it does appear when you first look that it's not compliant, but they do have a variance.
Okay, anything else?
now, the plan that we see before us is the plan that is expected to be signed, and it conforms with all the requirements of the Registry of Deeds for an A&R plan.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone here? Anyone else on Zoom? Apparently not. Is there a motion?
I will move that the board find that approval is not required and authorize the planner to sign on behalf of the board.
Second.
Designated. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. Roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I will vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. Motion carries. That was this. All right, 2D, approval under subdivision control not required. Plan for 85 Brigham Road.
Okay. So this is another. Oh, sorry.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Marcello, owner of 85 Brigham. I purchased back in March. I think it meets all the requirements. I had it surveyed recently, which you were provided with a copy of, I believe.
Yes.
So I'm just here to answer any questions I can.
Mr. Chair, if I may just give some background as well. The applicant submitted this application on June 6th to appear before you today. We did have some initial correspondence by typical review that I do when I look at the regulations of the subdivision regulations. There was some minor clarifications that I requested, including adding and labeling some stone walls, clarifying in the plan notes that the lots are simply being divided into 3, including I did request locations of septic and any other subsurface and surface drainage per the regulations. I do this note appear, just want to bring that to your attention. In terms of other, that's the kind of primary indicator regarding septic. And everything else was kind of minor administrative things, adding the seal, etc. So again, this one was a little bit more straightforward in terms of no prior no prior variances or anything of that nature, and our review was that there was no glaring issues in compliance with Mass General Law.
Any questions, comments? Anyone here or out on the web? Seeing nothing.
I move that we find approval is not required and direct staff to do the appropriate documentation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good luck. And to E, the draft decision for 44 Old Upton Road site plan approval.
So I will give my background. So I know that this was a 9-pager, so a little bit tough, but basically I incorporated all of the basics, everything that we had discussed at the prior meetings. There hasn't been any changes in terms of exhibits to incorporate to this draft. I do see Mark David is on the line if you would like to speak to the draft and any of the findings or the conditions that were included.
Nope. No issues.
Okay. Yes, so I'm happy to answer any additional questions regarding the findings, but this was a, site plan approval, all the standard conditions, et cetera, are included.
Questions, comments? Questions out there? Questions out there?
I read through it and nothing caught my eye,
Excellent.
which may or may not mean anything.
In that case, do we have a motion?
Move that the board approve the decision with all the appropriate favorable findings, and were there waivers?
There were.
Granting all the requested waivers.
There was.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Let's
Is there any
see.
discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I'll vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. Motion carries. Discussion items, mill overlay.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, Gabe, would you prefer me to share the presentation?
Yeah, I think that might make more sense.
I already have.
Hi everyone. Nice to see you all again. We'll get the presentation pulled up, but yeah, like I'll discuss it, but basically I've been talking with Dave and with Fiona. I know I don't even remember the time frame. I think it was like a year or two ago. We had been working on the mill overlay bylaw with Chris, and I guess Dave and Fiona were thinking about perhaps revisiting it with the planning board for a variety of reasons. And so, yeah, Dave and Fiona, if you want to jump in at any point, but
Sure.
yeah.
Gabe,
Yes.
if I may just add, just so that it is clear to the board, we have outstanding LPA hours with CMRPC that we need to use. I know this has been a topic of conversation, been kind of kicked back and forth with the board. We thought that it might be a good idea to utilize the hours to just evaluate kind of where we want to go with this. Basically, if we want to pursue the overlay as we originally intended, or if we want to open up to maybe a broader adaptive reuse bylaw. So Gabe and myself and Dave worked together to compile, actually Dave, worked to compile a wonderful list of properties where this could be applicable. Whereas when we were focusing on the mills, it was really only 2 properties that this could actually work in. So I think opening it up, we thought, toward a broader adaptive reuse strategy would make a lot more sense and avoid, feel like we're targeting certain specific parcels.
Yeah.
So essentially, I asked Gabe to go on a research mission for us to kind of find examples of successful bylaws in surrounding communities and examples of buildings that have been reused and that can utilize this. So So that is kind of how we got here and the focus today. And I think what we really would like to try and nail down is answering, what direction the board wants to go in, if any, based on the findings, and then figuring out next steps based on what you decide you want to do.
Yeah, let me sort of follow up on that, particularly paying attention to the slide that's on the screen. The second bullet item was rather an interesting idea, and Gabe had prepared sort of a draft bylaw that was presented to us over a year ago, early in 2022. And we really haven't followed up on that, which is why we're here now. But part of that was something that was really kind of independent of mill reuse or reuse of any kind, and that was some use table regulations for a couple of new uses, incubator or innovation center and makerspace. And I think it was sort of there was a more of a distinction made between light and heavy industrial. So those concepts, which you'd have to go back in the archives and meeting materials to find it, but those concepts are worth some consideration on their own merit, as well as in connection with any possible mill reuse. But perhaps more importantly, the key question in my mind was whether the board was interested in looking sort of narrowly at reuse of typical old mill buildings, of which we have exactly 2 remaining in Grafton, the Wiskonup Mill in South Grafton and Washington Mills. Those are the only 2 big traditional mill buildings that we have. So we could focus on those, or this also came out of the concepts that Gabe brought to us early last year, was to broaden the idea into adaptive reuse of a broader category of historical buildings, to include old fire stations, old churches, old educational buildings, or more generally old commercial buildings that were like 50 or more years old and met some minimum size criteria. So the list, that's really at least what I'm interested in is sort of which direction the board wants to go in considering reuse of old buildings.
Any idea how many hours we have available?
Gabe, correct me if I'm wrong. We have at least 12.
Yeah, I think we might have at this point, like for the rest, and this would be through June 30th. I believe we would have like 8 to 12.
Right. Well, now, given the work that you've done on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
The hours run by the fiscal year, not the calendar year. Something runs on calendar year.
This is fiscal.
So, okay. It seemed a little bit of a stretch where we only have the 2 mills and they have particular circumstances. How well, it's been a little bit of a struggle to see a really good proposal. I guess at least scoping this out and seeing what opportunities or needs there might be out there beyond that could be a good use of some hours.
Yeah.
And I think I would agree for the rest of the year. I don't anticipate completely. I mean, I think if the board decides to go with the old bylaw, we can just, I would have some time to make any minor changes and you could move forward. If there's interest in doing a more expansive, or even if you wanted to expand it marginally, I mean, if you look at the bylaw we proposed, I mean, it would be fairly easy to change it around to, roughly to include a broader array of buildings. But if there was more specific, I'll get into it in the presentation, but if there's more specific, this would be an opportunity to scope it and maybe go for a DLTA next year or something along those lines.
Yeah. I'll just say for me at the high level, I want to see us have an option in place for these, even those 2 mills, in the shorter term at the very least. But that said, I think a better use of time overall would be a more inclusive thing that can be applied to more than just those 2 mills. So I would definitely like to see at least the rest of this fiscal year if we can use this to try to see what we can do with something better.
Yeah, with respect to those 2 traditional mills, the one in South Grafton exists within the Village Mixed Use District, which comes very close to already allowing the types of reuse that we might imagine. There might be some tweaks there. And Washington Mills, although there is no short-term prospect that that's going to be a candidate for reuse, nevertheless, its location in New England Village ties in with some of the thoughts we've had over the years of creating a village mixed-use district there.
Yes.
So in the case of those two mills, an expansion or adaptation of the existing village mixed-use zoning would probably work well for reuse of those mill buildings.
Yep.
But the broader concept of enabling some adaptive reuse of some class of historic buildings throughout the town, that would be, that would require more work in zoning to address that topic.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's not so much a zone issue per se as it would be a use issue.
Yes.
Because these things, the properties that are potential candidates are scattered all over. In fact, if the board might be interested in seeing that list of candidate properties that I had developed just for our conversation with Fiona and Gabe. So it's not something we could, in any practical way, go through tonight. But if we wanted to take a look at that, we could certainly share that with the board.
Right. Dave, do you mind me asking, do you remember off the top of your head how many candidate properties were in the list? 'Cause there was at least...
There were, in terms of commercial, I counted it, in terms of commercial properties, there were over 30. And that's just looking at anything over 5,000 square feet. If you made it smaller, if you allowed under 5,000, I mean, that would be even bigger. There were 5 fire stations, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 addresses for churches, which include multiple buildings,
Gabe,
about 10 educational buildings.
do you have it open in front of you?
Yeah, one sec. I'll just,
Let me give you sharing permissions. I think it might just help the board when we're having this conversation to just take a cursory look at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we do that before or after the presentation?
Yeah, why we can run through the presentation. I think that we've started to talk about the meat and potatoes, but we can talk through the presentation, then we can show the board the list, because I think that'll really be telling.
How long is the presentation gonna be?
Like a few minutes.
Okay,
It's
because
brief.
we're coming down to our hearing times.
Oh, okay. Understood. In short, the proposed bylaw would allow for the reuse of mill and institutional buildings 60 years or older that were 5,000 square feet or larger, to allow for 2 or more dwelling units, and potentially with mixed uses alongside, like the makerspace concept or office uses. Have discussions with David and Fiona. Should we continue with the original bylaw, which is limited to these large mill and institutional buildings, or expand the bylaw into a broader adaptive reuse bylaw that would allow for large and small buildings to be repurposed into multifamily housing while preserving historic characteristics? Again, there isn't a substantial amount of mill and of strictly mill buildings that would qualify, so expanding the qualifications would allow for a larger number would allow for the inclusion of commercial buildings. So there are several options we could look at to adapt the mill overlay bylaw into a general adaptive reuse bylaw. Again, allowing for the conversion of newer, smaller, and commercial buildings would allow for a greater number of candidates compared to the original bylaw. We have identified over 30 commercial buildings over 5,000 square feet. You could also look into the conversion of single-family homes into multi-family homes or commercial spaces, which would preserve the aesthetic character of a neighborhood while allowing for broader uses and potentially reducing development costs. To get into this a little bit, I spent Thursday and Friday looking into examples. There actually aren't, in our region at least, I could not find any adaptive reuse bylaws that weren't limited to basically mill and institutional buildings. So, looking at something like the school in Uxbridge or mill buildings throughout the region, which have been candidates for adaptive reuse. I did find a couple interesting examples, which I think speak to some of the paths we could look at. this is a furniture store in Brockton that they were able to maintain that historic facade, but convert the entire building into many units of affordable housing. And then this is an 1885 Victorian in Cambridge that was converted into multifamily housing, basically like a shelter for women with children. And they were able to adopt near net zero energy standards on the building too. So again, there's a lot of different paths we could look at. And then obviously around the region, there's institutional and mill buildings that are often discussed for adaptive reuse. So there's some considerations. Expanding the adaptive reuse bylaw may require the incorporation of new definitions. The adaptive reuse bylaw in Leicester includes a provision for a horizontal mixed-use development. So instead of ground floor retail with apartments above, you could have ground floor residential housing along with ground floor retail. So this could make sense for something like a strip mall, which I know we're talking about historic buildings, but again, we could have when we're looking at adaptive reuse, there's a lot of properties you could think about that might, if you had a vacant strip mall, for example. And then something like a density bonus, if you're trying to make adaptive reuse a really attractive option for developers and want to preserve existing historic buildings, a density bonus would be something that could attract developers and make it a more financially feasible option. So that's it for the presentation. Like I said, I could not find any examples in our region outside of mill and school buildings, basically. But I can screen share the list that Dave put together. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Well-
Maybe a little, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
First of all,
There you go.
every time
Oh, no, it's really small.
No, I know, I got it. Sorry.
my thing up at CMRPC is, hey, most of the software that you use has a way to do a full screen display of the content, so we don't have to use up some of the space on all of the buttons that you use.
Yeah, let me.
That makes it about twice as big, the part that's important.
Yeah, I don't. I can figure that. This is
All
on
right,
my.
never, it's okay.
Yeah. So as you can see, I'm gonna make this smaller because no. So these are historic mills that Dave pulled. We have 6 Depot Street, 20 North Main Street. So Dave, are these separate buildings on
Yes.
the mill property? Okay.
Right, yeah. It looks the way it does because it lists every individual building. It's interesting with Washington Mills, you've got quite a number of buildings and quite a wide time span in which they were built.
Right.
This list includes all of them, no matter how old or new they are.
And none of are any of those in use, or are they all vacant?
They're all in use.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why I said earlier, Washington Mills is not a short-term candidate for
Right.
redevelopment. They're still an active, actually a mill.
I was gonna say if they built that in 1989, I would hope they're not out of business. So then next, also Washington Mills.
Yeah,
You
they've
have
got-
several buildings through the 70s. The Wyman Gordon facility through 86, and then Hickey Leather. You have 30,000 square feet in 1946. So moving on. So I actually think the final version of the bylaw that we talked about did include religious and like municipal buildings.
Yep.
So here we have 5 fire stations, 3 of which are under 5,000 square feet, but I assume they're fairly recent. Those must be in use.
Yes, all with the exception of the first one, the Firehouse
Mm,
Museum. Well,
which is
that's
a-
in use as a museum. It's a very small, but the Fire Station 2, Station 3, and Station 1 are all currently in use. Former Station 1, that's the one up at 3 Worcester Street, That one is not in use as a fire station, but it is in use as a maintenance and storage facility for the schools,
Oh, okay.
which, for those who've been paying attention to all, you're aware that there are some discussions going on about what to do with that building,
Great.
whether it even preserve the building. But that's sort of neither here nor there.
All right. And then looking at religious buildings, like I said, there are about 10 throughout town. I guess in particular, you have the former Methodist Church, which is well under 5,000 square feet. Is that currently in use for anything?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. I forget off the top of my head the name of the church organization that's now using, but it is currently a religious use. I labeled it former Methodist Church because that's what probably a lot of people who know it at all probably
Right.
remember it as that.
Yeah. So again, several buildings as options. Moving on to educational buildings, again, about 10.
And I think all of them right now are in use.
Yes, they're all
Okay.
in use one way or another.
So now, I guess the big change that we could think about is including older commercial buildings.
Right.
And so, like I said, there's over 30 of these throughout town. All of these are over 5,000 square feet, so all of them would qualify. But it seems like most of these are in use. So if there's any comment on a specific building, like the former Tupperware building, that's a huge building. Was that a factory or just a?
Yes?
Yes.
It's
Okay.
more than one thing.
It has been many factories over the years. It was, I think, the first major factory that Earl Tupper put together to make Tupperware.
Oh, wow.
Subsequent to that, it's undergone. It's had many owners and many different operations. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what's currently there. Currently, I think there is some plan. Someone fairly recently took ownership and is doing something there, but I'm not at all sure.
I'm
I,
not sure.
I seem to remember not too far back, someone saying that there was a batting cage operation or something of that sort. Sports, golf or something
Yeah.
in there. Okay, well, you have a list of prospects. Yeah, the former cable studio. I don't know whether it's actually being used. I'm familiar with the space, having
Yes.
lived through the whole life of it with cable. But it's got a downstairs, which is functioned as a separate space, and the front and the back sometimes function as separate spaces. So it can be interesting. Okay, so we know that there's a whole list of places that are possible. How much? What's the next level of looking at, or expanding or whatever, for use of hours?
I think ultimately, Gabe, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
jumping in quickly, just so we can wrap up, and this will likely need to be another conversation with the board, because I think it warrants a little bit more conversation that we can't get into tonight. But I think based on the findings today, if the board would like to, it sounds from what I heard that we'd like to look at a broader type of bylaw. That's, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the original drafting was definitely not anything that we'd currently try and pursue. I think a larger scale, I know that it was challenging to find some examples of bylaws and reused buildings in our region, but I think given the list, even though a lot of properties are obviously currently in use, I think I don't think that it negates the need to be able to look at this. So I guess the board should probably direct myself, and I guess Gabe to use whatever remaining hours how you see fit based on what we've discussed. Or if you think it warrants an additional conversation before we do another deep dive.
Why don't we do a motion to let you look at that and if you need more from us, come back. But
Right. One of the things that I thought would be interesting, if the board was interested in pursuing this broader adaptive reuse topic, would be to take that list of property, that candidate list of properties, and you know, sort of get a sense of the different form factors, the different styles of building, pictures. And we, you can kind of look at the picture and imagine some reuse opportunities, and that might help in looking at taking that whole list and sort of looking at the part of it that the properties that seem to be likely candidates for reuse, and taking a closer look at those. That might help set the direction for how we set the parameters for reuse in the zoning bylaw.
is that what you want to make a motion for us to do?
So moved.
Can we call that a motion?
Yes. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I hope not.
Gabe, so I will touch base
Yeah.
with you.
We need to vote.
Let's take a vote.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. The motion carries. Thank you, Trev. Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
We'll
And
see you
yeah, Fiona,
see
we'll
you
follow
before
up
too
if
long.
you want to talk this week.
Okay.
Okay.
It being past 7:30, we will move to our public hearing schedule. The first item is continuation of the hearing on 62 Wesson Street, special permit.
Good evening.
Hi.
Should I go?
Unless you want me to do a brief intro, or if you
Go
want
ahead,
to speak.
Fiona. Go ahead.
Sure. So the 62 Weston application, there's been a couple of recent updates with this. I'm sure the board has seen the exhibits. We did receive feedback from the fire department per the request of the board the last meeting, and Jeff Walsh from Graves Engineering put in his report to check with them. So we did. I did ask for comment. It was uploaded as an exhibit, which I can share if the board would like, but I think that everyone has probably seen it at this point. Mr. Colleen did seem to misquote some things, including looking at the common driveway and utilizing the regulations for streets in the subdivision regs, as opposed to the more some of the common driveway specifics, including at least the minimum width for a common driveway is 18 feet, not 24. So I did ask. I responded and requested clarification. Essentially, my biggest concern, I think, was the turnaround, and clarification if the turnaround, being able to turn around as the current site plan shows, is adequate or not, because I think that only they'll truly be able to confirm that. But other than that, I think either it was misquoted in the email, or incorrectly referenced, or the applicant had met the standards. There is, and I'll have the applicant speak to this, but there is hydrants present. It wasn't totally, I don't know if they just missed it in the site plan, but there is 2 hydrants present on Wesson Street and Magnolia. So, I think just wanted the board to be aware that, we did follow up with fire. I think that fire did was quoting the regs, but I think they just we're looking at the wrong,
Yeah.
some of the wrong sections, so I just wanted that to be,
They didn't go far enough.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
bylaw has a special section for these, common driveways. And among other things, it references a section in the subdivision, rules and regulations. And there are different standards than the general roads
Right.
standards.
Right.
We don't say you have to build a 24-foot road. We say, I think it's 18, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that was just, now that everything's online, it's hard to follow.
Yeah. From my read of what the captain sent in, it seems like he did a quick glance at the plans from my read and kind of quoted what he read of the subdivision road, regs, rather than having any specific concern with the plans, other than thinking that they didn't meet the subdivision road regulations, which they don't have to. So I did not see anything new from the captain that I find concerning here, at least from my understanding.
I don't recall us ever requiring a turnaround at the end of a common drive, because that's usually the driveway into the furthest, the last property.
Right.
Yep.
I can see if a fire engine goes up there, I can see the issue, but hey, some of us have long driveways. Well, some of them have long driveways.
Yes, there are some fairly long driveways in town, but
Yeah.
I think.
There's one just down the road from you. You can't even see the three houses.
Yes. I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, and there's one next to me actually too.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think
With
you're,
one, well, it's not a common drive, but it's a driveway that's like 500 or 700 feet long.
no, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, that driveways can be long, but we don't require turnarounds.
So good evening, my name's Norman Hill.
Oh, yes, North.
I'm a licensed civil engineer and a licensed land surveyor in the state of Massachusetts. I'm with Land Planning, which is a consulting firm here in Grafton. So I just brought you a couple things just about this discussion of a hydrant. I brought you two pictures of a hydrant at the corner of Wesson and Magnolia. So that hydrant in that photo is within 500 feet of the two houses on this proposed common driveway. And also, I would not say this is a long common driveway. It's less than 300 feet in its total length. It's not a very long common driveway. So I just wanted to speak to those two. I think this letter that came back from the fire department, I think he sort of looked at it as if it were a road, but it's not a road.
Right.
So I responded with a letter to Fiona, just to point out the sections, and the definitions particularly, it says common driveway or a road, and so I just pointed out those different sections of the bylaw that clearly states this is a common driveway and not a road.
Yeah. So,
So,
is there anything more?
if we have received all the information we expect to receive, we could consider closing the public hearing and then acting on a draft decision. So, unless there's any public comment,
Is there any comment or input on this from anyone
if I could.
on the internet or in the room or, okay, Fiona?
Yes, so I just wanted to pull up, I guess, confirm with the applicant that there's nothing, that no language in the draft decision that was posted, that,
No, that's fine, Fiona, it's fine.
okay. There was a couple of questions that I did have, just confirming, believe I will need to update the exhibits, obviously, because of the material that came in.
2 more sets of the
Recently.
plans?
Yeah, so I need to just add
You'll bring those by tomorrow?
Yes, and obviously modify the language that was requested at the prior meeting regarding the fire department, so I will
I'm
just,
sorry, which language?
I had followed up, the concerns, I had put in the finding 6, that we would follow up to confirm that the board, compliance in terms of fire access, et
Oh,
cetera,
okay.
and so I need to go back and fix that. Just so I just want to be very clear about what I'm doing, so if anyone has a chance to comment. I did have a question we did speak to the detail of the common driveway cross section,
Yes, there's a
finding 12.
detail on page 3. I had handed it out last
okay.
last meeting. Yes, it shows
Okay.
depth of the stone and the fabric and the gravel and
Yep,
Yep.
just wanted to confirm with the board that that is fine in your opinion. They, that was brought up at the last hearing, and I did put it in as a finding, just to be careful. In addition, there was another comment, the utilities. We did have a discussion about that last time.
my client's willing to go either overhead or buried.
I think my sense was that the board landed on saying the applicant's discretion as to how
Let the buyer decide. Yeah.
And I'm just confirming that the conditions, I'm going to pull this up on my screen. Just give me 1 second here.
I will say this as a point of, order on this, fact that we're going through the decision right now, but we haven't even closed the hearing. We might,
No, it's we're discussing what is gonna be in the decision.
okay,
Yes, it
Okay.
is legitimate to deliberate on the decision while the hearing is still open.
okay.
So this section here, just confirming that this draft, if the applicant wanted to speak to any of this, or the board, I wanted to just bring that up. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall submit a final plan that includes these specifics.
Which specifics, Fiona?
The highlights here, sorry, can you see?
Oh, I can't.
Notation on the plans that the plans include clearer details of the construction of the
I'm at
common
an angle.
driveway. Notation on the plans that the driveway is crowned with a slope of 1/8 of an inch per foot.
Fine.
A revision of the plans that includes the incorporation of underground utilities, particularly due to the proximity to well-saturated soils, aesthetics, and long-term maintenance.
So I think we decided that the utilities would be up to the discretion of the buyer, whether they're underground or overhead.
So,
Yeah.
That's how I remember the board's discussion ending up. We deliberated and discussed that a bit.
Yep.
Pros and cons of overhead versus underground utilities.
And
How
then
about if you add on at the end, if the applicant desires to use underground utility?
we could,
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering right, an element of the Graves comment was that the plan should show the location of utilities.
Yeah.
Without specifying overhead or underground.
yeah.
How long the driveway?
That'd be fine. Excuse me, Fiona, that last bullet,
The last, I was gonna read it for
that
you.
addresses that recent letter from the fire department. Can that last bullet just go away?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's included in the thing that needs
I
to
get
be.
it.
Yep,
Okay, perfect.
okay. And
The other houses on that street, are they all above ground utilities or underground?
Yes.
I think everything,
Both.
well,
Yes.
no, the subdivision
Right.
nearby is modern, it's all underground.
Yeah, the Magnolia Farm subdivision is underground. Everything else on Weston Road and Weston Street is
Ancient.
above ground.
Utility poles.
Yep.
And I guess there's sewer in Wesson. I don't remember. I suppose there's sewer in Wesson.
I'm sorry. No,
Wesson,
this is just
Sewer.
on Weston Street. Yeah.
not Wesson.
It doesn't have any frontage on Magnolia.
I think Bob's question was just out of curiosity.
What's going past,
Is it sewage
What-
or is septic?
water or sewage going by,
There is water on Weston, town water. Yeah,
just water but not sewer?
correct. Well, the sewer comes down Magnolia, goes to the house across the street, and they left a stub
Okay,
for lot 3. There's a stub for lot. So lot 3 will be on the sewer. 1 and 2 are on septic.
okay.
And I think that there was one other minor there. So I just wanted to confirm the waivers because I took a stab at this, but there wasn't landscaping elements included. I did notice that this language. I didn't want to not include it without confirming. I figured it will be a non-issue because my understanding was that you were applying for a waiver to not include landscaping.
No, these lots will be landscaped. In fact, most of the trees will be preserved.
You know, as a common driveway special permit, that would not typically include landscaping.
I don't think we need this 0.8 from
Just
Right.
from our
Yeah.
decision in this case.
Right, because this permit is specifically for the common driveway, not
Right.
for the whole scope of development of the lots.
Okay, let's move right along here.
okay.
Anything else? Okay. Anything else? Fiona?
Yeah, sorry. Just triple check. Norman, if you could just give this one last look and confirm that I got the waivers correct here.
I don't recall asking for any waivers.
Well, the way that it looked like you had included majority of all of the site plan elements, but there was a couple of things like in like landscape specifics, for example. Like I didn't see that specifically. So, and then the box wasn't checked.
Yeah, I did.
So it was like a checklist of everything that you did do, and then whatever was left out is what I assumed to be waivers.
No, I didn't ask for any waivers.
Okay, so so that's what I wanted to confirm with you before,
Yeah, there are no waivers.
so we can just take this out entirely.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That is my last question.
Anything else?
I had a question, Bob. It's more for Natalia. Natalia, I don't believe I attended the original meeting, and I don't think I had a Mullins submitted for this. Can you confirm? Do I need to vote, or can I vote?
You may not need to.
It should be fine.
He was
But repeat the question.
I don't believe I attended the original meeting, and I don't remember submitting a Mullins for this.
On the decision. It's also written that you were absent at one of the first hearings, the March 27th, and then there is no Mullen in the record. I did peek at that.
Was it a meeting that we opened and continued?
That would check.
I think so.
Yes, I believe so.
Because I think that might be.
How about Mara?
Yes, the 27th was a continued hearing. It looks like,
So then that wouldn't count
No testimony.
because no testimony was taken.
if I'm looking at this right. Let's see, April 19th. No, that's the wrong date.
I think we did continue, wanted to touch base with the town council about the A&R, and that sort of put everything on hold that night.
So the original, when it was open, was nothing happened.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Okay.
Yep.
so you're saying that
I think
he's eligible?
I believe so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything more? Anything from anyone here or out there? If not,
Move that the board close the public hearing and approve the decision as drafted with all the modifications discussed this evening.
Second.
moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Any comment? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. He can't vote.
Oh,
you very
that's
much.
correct.
Of the votes, were there 4 that were eligible to vote on the special permit?
Well, what,
Yeah.
how about Maria?
Mara.
Mara? Was she eligible?
I believe she was eligible, yes.
Mara, do you know if you were eligible?
I honestly don't know.
It's not listed in the draft that she was absent. It says she was here for all public hearings.
Yes.
All right, then I think, to be safe, let's get a vote from Mara
On the special permit specifically, yes.
Yes.
on the special permit, which is what we're voting on at the moment, I think.
All right.
Yes. Well, the motion is sort of combined, closing the hearing and the special. Yeah, and yeah, so let's take the motion as having been to close the public hearing.
Let's take a vote on close the hearing.
Does the,
Okay. Let's
Roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
aye,
I vote aye. And this is close to the public hearing. Mr. Davison,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. Motion carries. Now,
Now, there would be a motion to approve the decision as drafted with all the modifications discussed. And for that, I think that formally the chair has to designate the associate as a voting member for this.
yes, which I hereby do.
Consider it done.
And we do have a hand from Talia.
Talia,
Muted.
I have a question because on all applications, we require that waivers be filled out if you're not providing that information. So if the information is not provided, then that would require a waiver from that item. So it would seem that there should be waivers that are approved because of that list that we require for each application. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, so a list of requested waivers was not provided.
Well, the list was provided. It was, what Fiona said was that it basically marked the things that were included. And so therefore she had assumed or had put into the decision the things that were not included, which would be what you would require a waiver for. So by using that list, she came up with a list of waivers that should be included in the decision. Does that make sense?
So yeah, so the submitted list of the submitted waiver request list basically implies a request for specific waivers, sort of.
Right, because if you're not including it, you need to request a waiver, even if the project, because the list is for all projects, small and big. So there will be waivers for smaller projects because there's items on it that would be obviously not something that they would provide, but that is what the waiver list is for.
Yes.
is the intent to grant whatever waivers may be required?
Yeah, I think the intent is to grant waivers for
As
the complete list of information that's supposed to be submitted with an application. The request is to waive those items that were not actually submitted.
If I may,
is that part of the motion you just made, Dave?
Yes, I would say yes. Fiona has something to say.
yes, so that was kind of the confusion that we had is, for example, I put in that you technically requesting a waiver from signs because you don't need any signs for this application, and there was nothing submitted. So, for the record, I include that.
That's
the
fine.
earthwork calculations,
Yep.
those types of things that.
Right.
Specifically.
So this ends up being fairly typical that the board grants a waiver regarding the submission of information that's simply not relevant to the application. Normally those waiver requests are submitted more explicitly.
That's fine.
Let's try to find the short path to the end here.
Yes.
Like I said,
So-
the
so-
waivers that might be required
Yes.
or are turn out to be required will be granted.
Right. So
Fine.
Do you think that'll pass
grant,
legal test?
grant waivers on the submission of all information that was not submitted because it's not relevant to the application. However we want to put it. And
is that your motion, David?
yes. Yeah, I
And
think
I second.
Is that the motion that you seconded?
It is.
yes, and I think
And
probably,
the discussion is completed.
yes.
So,
We're good.
And
We know what we're
we
trying
may
to
need
do.
a break after this.
and are we invoking the associate member?
I already did.
Okay, just double checking.
Roll call.
All right, Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Ms. McCormack,
I
and Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. Motion carries. Application is
Thank you.
completed. Are you going to be staying?
No.
Okay. Your play. I don't want to discuss the next hearing, but you I think are in a butter to Donahue Lane. Aren't
Yes. Yes.
You? And so I had a question. How much of Donahue Lane do you own? To the center line?
Well, Mr. Donahue did a plan, it's on record, it's 20 feet wide. So I haven't looked at all the deeds. I know he didn't reserve the fee in the road when our property was deeded. Our property wasn't deeded by him, it was deeded by someone else. So I wouldn't own to the middle, but the other people on the street may own. And the derelict fee
Okay,
statute.
the answer is we don't know yet.
I'd have to read all the deeds to see who,
Yeah.
who reserved the
Okay.
fee in the road, and
Okay, that,
it's very
we're
complicated.
we're gonna have some conversation about that right after you
I haven't
escape.
researched, so I really can't comment. All right,
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thanks.
All right.
Good luck with the,
Thank you.
okay. Okay, that brings us to 6B, the continued hearing on 18 and 22 Donahue Lane. Fiona.
So I have been corresponding with the applicant who is here today. He has submitted to the exhibits a couple of items in the letter, a revised site plan that is removing the 12,000 square foot building, the traffic assessment dated May 25th. And what's called a zoning feasibility study, which discusses the access rights along Donahue Lane. So a few things that I wanted to speak to, I don't know if the board would prefer to hear the applicant first and then hear my concerns, or vice versa.
Why don't you
Sure.
go first?
Sure. So a couple of things, sorry, a lot of paper here. The easier things, the traffic assessment incorporates the building. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the applicant. You know, the findings include the building, and the information from the original application. So I'm not sure if that would heavily sway the outcome of the assessment based on the revisions that are being provided. I wanted to bring that to the attention, of the board. A couple of other things in regards to these exhibits. The zoning feasibility study, the concern, and I don't know if council is here or not, I don't think so.
There.
Okay, the concern isn't really access, it's establishing ownership and bringing the road up to the regs that we needed to support this application. It seems like from what I understood from reading the analysis, part C, is the case law is well settled and those who acquire land along a private way own the fee in said land to the center line of the private way pursuant to Mass General Laws 183, Section 58. So that is my interpretation of that, and what I believe, we should confirm with you is that all of the abutters along Donahue Lane need to sign off because they'll own to the center line. I mean, I'm happy to hear if your council if that's what they meant, and confirm that that's what they meant. But in reading this, I think that the mark was slightly missed. You have the right to access your property through the road. That was never anything that was called into question. I think it was who owns the road and who's going to be responsible for bringing up to the subdivision regs. So that was just something I wanted to bring up, and I will, that's obviously one of the most important factors of this entire project, and something that we need to confirm.
And who's gonna give permission to construct road on their property if they own to the center of the
Right.
way, the right of way?
And I think that, the question of zoning feasibility, in general, I guess maybe I was, the what was submitted in the exhibit was, I guess, confusing in terms of getting final consensus on this issue. So I think that it would be appropriate to speak to that first, because that's obviously, as I mentioned, the biggest thing that we're going to need to establish. And it also will dictate the next steps that you need to take.
So I think the biggest issue was the recognized frontage that we have, and through subsequent communications with some officials in town, there was a question on if we are recognized frontage. That was the issue.
That's not our,
I don't remember us bringing that up.
that's not our,
Zoning enforcement.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that,
So,
that might be true, but.
Yeah. So we brought in counsel who has experience with this type of zoning issues, and we were more speaking to recognizing that we do have frontage, therefore we have the right to access our property as well as modify our land.
Your land.
Yes.
Yeah.
My land.
Point is that we asked who owns, and we still don't know.
Right.
And we heard from Norman that it's even less clear than I thought. Cause I looked on the town GIS, which is not too helpful here. I wouldn't bet the farm on what I find on the town GIS for this road.
No.
It shows, I think, a 30-foot boundary between the property lines. And so that doesn't consider the ownership to the center of whatever it is. This is,
And that was the reason why we eliminated the building.
yeah, but it doesn't, you still, fire department still wants a proper road. 24 feet wide. And the rule talks about built to subdivision standards, which is substantial. And it's all the way out to Worcester Street. And, before we spend all night, I just have this problem that we have 5 members who I think are, four members and associate who are currently eligible to vote. Our associate hasn't indicated an interest in reappointment. So after the end of this month, we'll have 4 members who are eligible to vote on the current application. And you have to have 4 yes votes. So that puts you in a pretty tough position. And with all of the complexities, I'm not sure I see us getting to a vote this month. I mean, there's, all these we've got more questions. So I think you need to think about whether you want to step back and try again, when we can, start with a fresh hearing at a future point and get all of this straightened out.
Well, what we're also achieving, the other half, is to be granted a special permit to operate as a contractor's yard. So there's a twofold application here. Right now, we have a current special permit with some restrictions that don't suit our needs. So the purpose of this application is also to serve as a amendment to our current special permit.
Well, but you're asking for, I haven't thought that part about it.
That's the most
about that
important
part
to me.
of it specifically, but your application is broader, so our vote is across the whole thing. No, I interrupted you. You were in the middle of explaining.
Yeah, I think, well, firstly, I would just want to reiterate Bob's point that, with the board, only 4 eligible votes, you have to get 4 to get it passed. So that's just something to consider, as Bob mentioned, at the end of the month. That's all you're going to have. So it's something to seriously consider. before, if there's more information that needs to be gathered, which seems like there is, I don't think that we'll be able to accomplish it in 2 weeks before we lose our associate member. So that's kind of, I guess, a critical piece of this, as well as the information that we discussed earlier. But to clarify the special permit for the use, you want to expand on what you are currently doing. Your 2015 permit was only for, storage of lighter equipment. So this is obviously more significant. I just want that to be clear to the board that it's an expansion of the use, being able to have a bigger operation than what is allowed currently through the 2015 permit. So, I mean, I think that, again, in light of the complexities, I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts on that. But I also think that I would like to reiterate my previous question about your council and council's analysis on road ownership, because it does seem like it's noted in here, and if council discussed this with you, I would, I think that that's something that we need to establish. In section C. I mean,
So is the question, I mean, we can, I don't know.
Yeah,
if
we'll have to.
We
think
can
any
go
more-
through
all the
the
deeds. He
deeds.
has to go back through, so it's gonna have to back through legal counsel again.
That's what we were looking for.
Yeah, to see who
Yep.
actually owns it, as
Yeah,
Noel
that-
was saying earlier.
right, yeah.
Just to be clarify in my mind, if I'm remembering correctly, the discussion about ownership of the road arises out of the proposal to improve the road. So that if the special permit did not involve any changes to Donahue Lane, the ownership of the road from your property out to Worcester Street would not be an issue. But then the question would be, Donahue Lane in its current condition, does that allow the board, is that an obstacle to the proposed use, which is the expansion of the contractor's yard? And I notice that in the latest plan, the new building has been eliminated from the plan. So I'm not sure, at this point, it's sort of, we need to, I'd be interested in getting a better understanding of what the new plan represents now without that building, and how is that different from the old one?
Do you wanna see, I mean, we have it, I don't know if it's up on a screen anywhere.
I'll pull it up.
Basically, it's similar to what we had previously, except the building, which was in here, is now removed.
Yeah, and
Let me get it so I can get other people to see it.
And I just to help steer at least your answers up, one question that I have in my mind, I just want to say it out loud, before you're going, is removing the building, yes, but are we removing the volume of activity on the site? Are we removing the volume of equipment on the site? Because you're still having the same land space, so it just may not be covered by a building. I just want to know what's going on there as well.
Right, that was some of the question too, was what section on the regs required it to come up to subdivision standards? How does subdivision get wrapped into site plan standards? I know it's been referenced, but I didn't know where that actually got tied in of, what standard or which threshold that triggered subdivision, meeting those standards on.
I think it's in the bylaw, isn't it?
Yes, and we had met with the applicant before this even came before the board, and the fire department was at that meeting and said, with the expansion of this use from a public safety standpoint, it's not adequate. It's going to need to be brought up to at least their minimum standards, which align with the subdivision regs. So.
for the building. We haven't met with them subsequently by removing the building, so therefore we don't know what their comment is for the revised plan.
But you're still expanding the use,
We're expanding, yes, the storage yard.
right? So I think any expansion of the use is going to trigger changes that what's currently allowed through your current special permit. So the issue still remains from a public safety standpoint.
Maybe some feedback from fire on the new plan might be.
Yeah, they commented on the plan.
They have not commented yet.
So essentially now you can see it, is essentially just the building was taken off, they're retaining the existing building, took off some of the yard down here and just brought the access up. It's very similar to the old one, just basically minus the proposed building and retaining the original building that's there.
And how much of that area is paved and not
This would all be gravel.
all gravel?
Yeah.
We're essentially clearing trees, leveling a flat area and graveling it just for expanded storage space. All the stormwater provisions remain for the surface runoff on the impervious. We're not doing anything to Donahue Lane. We're just merely clearing trees that are part of the 8 acres we own and expanding gravel laydown area. So I don't feel that, we really need to, if there's nothing that's happening on Donahue Lane, I don't know why we would have to go through that.
Because otherwise we have to go against the fire department. We have an input from the fire department that they insist on the standard, and I don't see me voting to, something happens, the fire department has a problem up there, my fault, no.
Would it be fair if the fire department could comment on the current plan? If we can, can we request a review from the fire department?
Yep, but
Yeah.
this is all gonna spill over, the end of the month.
Yeah.
Which is the point. We get this a whole lot cleaner if we did it
We had
again.
to discuss
Don't-
whether to withdraw or
Right,
how to do that.
don't forget that I asked for cross-sections to help me decide whether screening and buffering were adequate. And, I don't think I've seen the cross-sections that I'm looking for.
No, not with the new plan.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, or I don't think that what we had was adequate.
We were gonna extend
even
them up
be-
through the
Right.
houses. We did that, and then with the new plan, we didn't update them, so we didn't.
Yeah,
submit
well, I couldn't even find them when I went back looking through. I thought maybe you had some, but I seem to recall that they weren't adequate for me back then, so they needed to be enhanced before, and expanded before we got to here.
And
So, we're not gonna get there.
Yeah, and I will say from at least from what I'm hearing today, and you can tell me if I'm misrepresenting it, is that the expanded use that you were looking at doing before when you first presented to us with the building, the usage of the site and the amount of use of the site is still going to remain the same as it was from when you first presented to now with just all the building. Is that accurate?
No. Because there's no building, so therefore there's no increased employee load on the site. It's just storage of materials. So there's no increase in employees above and beyond what our current permit is.
Okay.
Yes, I think probably at this point, I mean, we could spend more time to start talking about
Yeah.
some of the technical details, but from a procedural perspective, it seems reasonably clear that it will be important to find a way to restart the process so that we can have a full board eligible to vote on it. And this is not the first time applicants have faced that situation, and sometimes they will choose to withdraw the application, file a brand new application. On other circumstances, we have basically under the umbrella of the existing application, we have restarted the process, advertised new public hearings, and sort of started the process from ground zero, although carrying over the testimony and information that had been previously received.
I'm not sure that that's good in this case because there's been a lot of input from everyone, including a couple of folks out there.
Yeah.
And I just don't see, maybe we'll be lucky enough to get an associate, and they'll need to be on board with it too.
Given the rather substantial change in scope of the plan here,
Yeah.
It might turn out to be more efficient, more productive to withdraw this application, submit a new application with the new plans. You'll remember everything that's led up to this, and so you can probably anticipate a lot of what's going to be asked for, and start an entirely new public hearing process, with kind of a leg up on what otherwise might need to happen.
Yeah. The one thing that can happen is that, you know, you say, no, let's go on through, and we get to a vote, and the vote is no, or the vote isn't yes, the vote isn't 4 yeses, then you're 2 years, I think, before you can come back. So usually people ask to withdraw without prejudice at a point like this.
Yeah, we did exactly that not so very long ago.
Yep.
For similar reasons.
You know,
So that's probably the easiest path forward.
I blame the new guy.
So, it's a public hearing. I see a hand raised. Please, the greenish shirt, you need to come down. Come on down to the phone. To the phone.
Podium.
The microphone.
It's on.
And name and
Name and
address.
I have a couple of questions.
No, you have to give us your name and address.
Well, that was my first question. No.
No, that was my first question.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Bill Fairbanks, 4 Dunhill Lane, North Grafton. One of my questions is, it was brought up on March 27th, which we weren't there. One of the associates here mentioned why nothing was heard from Dunhill Lane. The reason why, Dunhill Lane was never notified. Never. Not one of us.
Well,
I've
I
had-
just looked into that today,
Yeah?
and the notice list included, I think, all or nearly all. I don't know whether it got out to Norm's.
It went to Hollywood, never came to Dunhill Lane.
So I could speak to that.
So I spoke to everyone on the street. Sorry.
She looked at it.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the mailing list is generated by the assessor's office, and they have the data and they run the tabulation, and then that becomes part of the application. When we received it, it had both addresses on the list. If there, some data, I'm not sure, but the list, we can only utilize the list that's generated from the assessors. That's all we can do. And when the applicant provides that information, we verify that both addresses are included, which they were, and we process accordingly.
Some boards better to get together then, because it's not right that we shouldn't be notified as well. I think there's been 3 meetings that were
You're on
postponed.
Donahue Lane?
Pardon?
You're on Donahue Lane?
Correct, number 4.
Right. The list says, actually, you don't have the list, Andy, do you? You could check his name. Or his address.
Not on there.
I'm sorry?
It is not on the list.
But it's the assessor they have their program that selects the parcels and then generates the buffer.
What's your
determines who gets
number?
notified.
Number 4.
4? 4. You may be beyond the distant, there's a law that says so many feet.
Well, yes, I understand that. But seeing as how this project has Dunhill Lane named in it, I would think it was logical that you would notify the people that live on Dunhill Lane. There's only 6 houses.
We have to follow the law
Well,
about who gets notified.
Then correct the law, because it's not
That's done in Boston.
it's not fair to us here.
Yeah,
And I would suggest that we get notified of any other meetings that go on referring to it as well, so we can be involved.
I'll just add one other thing. We pull the abutters list. We also advertise in the paper, on our webpage, etc. We try and be as transparent as possible to make sure that as many people are included. I mean, the people who aren't captured in the abutters list, it becomes very tricky when the planning department has to pick and choose who's specifically notifying one abutter over the other. It looks like we are favoring folks. We have to go through the channels. I understand your frustration. I really do. But we have to go through the channels that we go through. And we try and we post in town hall, we post on our website, we put it in the paper, we do as much as we can to get the word out there.
Is it possible that you could talk to them about making sure that we're on that list as well?
Yes, I did reach out to the assessor's office. I have not heard back, but I will
Because-
follow up again.
Wyoming Gordon's had their little meeting, and we weren't within that 300 feet. But Wyman Gordon's, when they had their meeting, we weren't within their 300 feet, but we got notified by planning board. So how does that work?
Don't you back up to the Wyman Gordon property?
He does.
No, you.
No,
I don't know which side you're on.
I am on the east side,
Yeah, the side.
which is the
But you
Hollywood
still
side.
may be within, because his Wyman Gordon's lot line is right behind the lots across the street from you.
Yeah, they extend down, so they,
Okay,
300 feet, I think, extends over the road.
No,
I don't know. We have to follow law. You can watch, the advertisements too,
Well-
of course, and
excuse me for interrupting you, but out of 18,000 population, how many people get the Grafton News?
they don't, the T&G doesn't share that with us.
No,
But it has to be, the advertising has to be in a paper, newspaper of local circulation, and there aren't a whole lot of those.
so you're not helping out Dunning Lane
No,
either
I
way.
understand. I understand.
The other thing to make note, and it's on my deed, that Leo R. Donahue in 1930 on his deed passes on the right of way all the way down to the end to everybody that owns the property on Dunning Lane. We all own to the middle. So all of us would have to make a decision.
I think I
Because if
said
the
that.
fire department is asking for that road to be 24 feet, that means taking property from other people. Because according to the Graves, they're written, it was 13 feet to 16 and a half feet wide,
The paved, what's now paved.
What is
What's
paved.
now.
which
A
means
road.
that the only way to make that any wider, they would have to either on the west side get permission from the owners on that side, which there's only, Noel's has partial and Manish has number 7. He has most of it.
Mm-hmm.
On the east side, you have telephone poles.
Oh, they'd have to move them. They'd have to get the,
Correct.
Yep.
And also you have, the fire department requested a 6-inch pipe. So if they request a 6-inch pipe, they'd have to dig up the road. What happens with the existing pipes that are there? They've been there for a while. Who's gonna pay for those if they break them?
that's,
So, I mean, these are questions that we have.
I understand, and I actually asked that question a little while ago about, their lawyer says people own to the middle of the road.
Yep.
So I said,
And-
they're gonna need permission of all the people who own to the middle of the road. And in that process, even if our process doesn't, and I'm not sure whether it would review the design of the road and all that, the abutters, can ask for whatever they, whatever it takes. I imagine some of the abutters might appreciate having the road,
On the
approved.
contrary. On the contrary.
Well, I can remember back, in the past that there were, years ago, there were complaints about the,
What year?
oh.
I've
I've been here for
since
33 years.
I've been there 1971.
Okay, I'm 2 years less. But here, I'm only 33.
And it's on my deed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and they'll find that when, okay,
Yeah.
so, yeah, but they're gonna have to ask you,
Okay,
and you're gonna be able to have a conversation with them, even if nothing else happens.
my knowledge that
I-
number 7 has been
I'm
asked.
not a lawyer.
I know. Number
and I
7
don't
has
play
been
one
asked
here.
and Noel's been asked, but nobody on the eastern side has been asked.
Who's been asked?
The western side of the street, which is number
There's only
7,
a Couple lots over there, aren't there?
is number 7, and Noel abuts it as well with
Yeah.
his automobile.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 on that side, other than their property down at the end of the street.
Right, but there's,
The eastern side has all the residentials.
yeah, I know,
Nobody's been asked.
well. We're discussing.
I'm just giving you the information so you have something to walk with,
Yeah, well,
okay?
yep,
And also, the board had asked for a traffic report.
We got a traffic assessment.
Correct. And the assessment was basically on Worcester Street. What about traffic on Dunning Lane?
That,
And that's,
well,
and they give you the speed. We're not asking what the speed was.
there's a specific set of things that go into a traffic report.
They, if I may, they speak to Worcester Street because it will obviously impact Donahue Lane, but it's not solely focused on Worcester Street. And the findings you can see.
It is
I guess
focused
maybe
on
I'm-
Worcester Street. It's
Okay.
Dunning Lane to Worcester Street does not give you any traffic at all.
What doesn't,
It doesn't specify any traffic at all.
I mean,
It just talks about Worcester Street. And that Dunning Lane would not be an impact, it's kind of far-fetched.
I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer, but from what I reviewed, from the conclusions and the findings throughout, Worcester Street was spoken to, but also it focused on its impact on Donahue Lane, and I think that's pertinent to this conversation.
And I will say we haven't even really talked about the traffic the traffic report that we have here as a board, but typically when we get a traffic report that the board wants, I expect us to have a peer review of the traffic report directly, so that we have a person that is representing the town reviewing that and giving us a report on what the traffic set they're submitting.
Well, all traffic reports that I've seen anyways, they generally put a strip out on the road counting the number of vehicles going both ways. And I didn't see anything.
I don't, well,
No, they use a radar gun to do speed limit.
I know that, well, I don't know. I suppose in some cases they do their own measurements, but a lot of times they use available data, like from CMRPC. There are various traffic countings that are done. If we go around and try again with a new process, we'll look at whether we've got a full traffic report or not. We'll look at whether it needs peer review or not. Usually they focus on intersections and capacity of intersections to handle traffic. I think some of our other criteria may get more to, like, people are going too fast or that kind of thing on the road.
If I may comment, I will say that this assessment is shorter than what I typically see in terms of traffic reports. So if the board were interested in pursuing an option of peer review,
Yeah,
That's
well,
something
I
to
think
consider.
maybe we should wait until we see whether we start over again before we worry about that. If we're gonna go forward, then gotta talk about a peer review. Because usually the peer review begins with, this meets all the standards, blah, 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 of a process. And, since this isn't a traffic report, it's a traffic assessment, it may not meet all of the requirement, the people who do this have a whole thing that they have to do. But I think maybe everyone can get home sooner tonight if we go the way we've been talking about and come at this fresh next month or whenever everything comes together. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The white shirt, the mask.
Good evening. My name's Steve Airy. I live at 13 Hollywood Drive. My name's Steve. I have a lot to go over. It's been 5 months running now that we've been kind of coming here. It's our third or fourth meeting. I also want to voice my frustration with not being notified. If you can look on either the poster board or that map, you can see my property. I'm 13 Hollywood Drive, and I should have been notified, but I wasn't.
Have you looked at in the application material, there's a map that draws a circle as well as there's a list of,
My guess is that I think it's 300 feet from where, my guess is that it was 300 feet from where the building was going to be.
it's supposed to be
Property
from the borders of the.
Whatever it was, it's not sufficient. Whatever you guys can do within your colleagues, within departments to check in on that would be appreciated. So this is going on 5 months now. In my opinion, my observation of the applicant not being prepared while getting a quote unquote leg up from you guys and the board. There's been rock crushing on site, which is illegal. The inspections department.
There's been what?
Rock crushing.
Oh, yes.
Yes, which is not approved use of the site. The town did not want to properly enforce that, so they gave the applicant over 2 months to remove equipment. I don't understand why that was the case. In terms of Donahue Lane, there's been trucks driving backwards onto 122. And then a traffic study was done by I don't know who. I could have my son do a traffic study if I wanted to. So that's just not sufficient. I guess what I want to go over is the 2015 special permit for a moment. Back in 2015, Mr. Makura applied for and was granted a special permit under the following conditions being met. And there's 4 conditions I see here that were just blatantly ignored and also not enforced by the town. So if anybody has a special permit in front of them, you could open up, what page is it? Page 5. Condition C2, there won't be a significant increase in traffic. There was. There wouldn't be any modifications to the site. There absolutely were. There wouldn't be runoff into wetlands. There wouldn't be trash left on property lines. There has been. So there's many things from this special permit that shows he got it granted, but disregarded it. There's something else in section 3 in the findings. One resident on Donahue Drive shared concerns about traffic and maintenance issues, and that there would not be an increase in traffic. There has been an increase in traffic. So this is to the board. There's no real reason to give a leg up, like you guys said earlier tonight, when the operations on site currently have been lied about. There's been illegal activity on site that's harmful to the residents. Rock crushing is extremely harmful. I have a 1-year-old son at home playing in the yard. We currently don't go out in the yard. We're kind of scared to be out there. All right, so I could go on and on. I'm really fired up right now. It's just really frustrating also that it's just clear that the applicant has not gone onto the project site to see the concerns of the residents, because the fire department study's on there, tons of concerns from residents, information about what we're looking for tonight's meeting, and it just was not looked at. So I'm gonna step away from the mic because I'm super frustrated, but I'm hopeful that other residents come up and check in too.
What was your number?
13.
13.
13 doesn't show.
Don't see it on the list. I didn't see it on the list. either.
No, but is it within the circle?
It should be. It abuts 18 Donahue Lane.
And look at all the comments from residents.
13 Hollywood abuts 18 Donahue.
Okay, there's something wrong with the notice, I think.
Yes.
But if we go ahead the way we're talking about,
Yeah, well, basically,
we'll drill down into that one in the future. On the violations, exactly how that plays into what we're going to do here is very tricky. This is a new special permit, and we're not supposed to say, no, you can't have it because you did something wrong on something else before. At least that's what I've been trained. So it gets tricky. Now, if you can document that you made complaints to the town, to the zoning officer, for the most part it would be the zoning officer, maybe conservation, if that's, a thing. If you could document those and we could look at what actually did or didn't happen. There's another point that you didn't mention, which is apparently the special permit wasn't recorded at the registry until quite recently, which is a problem.
And that's a problem for the town and the applicant. That shouldn't be on the residents to have to worry about things like that.
Well, not that, but the town doesn't come out there every day and listen for traffic and watch for what's going on the land. The people who are there need to do that, and they need to bring it. Our enforcement mostly works on a complaint basis. You know, we don't have dog catchers circling around town all day looking for stray dogs. When someone calls and says it's a dog.
I see what you mean, but it almost seems like the town was not there at all since 2015.
Well, you got to show, if you can show me that, or show us, that, complaints were made to the, to the relevant places, then we can see what the story is.
Okay, understand. So on the site, on the town website, if everybody in this room is able to look at that, I think I have at least 5 complaints on there, 5 letters of opposition, reaching out to whatever boards are necessary. And I'm hopeful that I work in a school system. If there's something that goes on and we feel like we're not doing our due diligence, I reach out to another department. Interdepartment relationship and make sure you do your due diligence there. So that's on the applicant, that's on the town. And we'll continue doing our part as residents, but we need to work as a team to make sure everybody's feeling safe and supported and that you guys have the best interests of us.
Let me just,
I do.
point out, just taking a quick look at the abutters list that was filed with the application and looking at the map, it appears that maybe the abutters list was generated off of 22 Donahue only and not 18.
Well, the listing says 18 and 22, and the screen grab from the map looks, so it's conflicting. And I brought this to just confirming that I brought this to the attention of the assessor's department when Mr. Ray brought this to us the first time.
Yeah, the screen grab from the map is around 22 Donahue
Well, that was the
only.
point I brought up this morning, to Fiona, because I was looking into the same thing. We've heard the complaints, and, the picture only shows a more limited set, and is
Yes.
he's not in the.
Right, so the picture here, 13 is just below the.
He's
I think-
outside of that.
Yeah, I think 17 is the lowest number on Hollywood that's included. And looking at the picture and the list of abutting properties both, it seems clear that the abutter list was generated only for the 22 Donahue Lane lot.
Right, so that's a problem. We have inadequate notice, because
so-
the project includes both,
That
both lots.
and I'm no lawyer, but that might actually be a problem in and of itself if we don't renotice.
Oh, yeah, oh.
Yeah.
If we start fresh and we have good,
That's another argument for
have
starting.
all of this, we don't have a lot of private ways. We hardly have any private ways outside of the condos that I can think of. None that get into this kind of thing. So it's not a well-known, well-developed.
Yeah, I think the whole question of the abutter notification is another reason why we really should start fresh. Make sure we start with a complete abutter list, and for future reference, and I know we usually assume that the abutter lists were generated out of the assessor's office, which they are, usually assume that they're accurate and complete. In this case,
Well, yes.
there was an oversight.
Who makes the request to them for the abutters?
The applicant
Yeah.
does.
Okay, so apparently they only asked for,
Or they may have
22.
asked, right, they may have asked for 18 and 22, and the abutters, the assessors looked only at the number 22.
or,
Mailing list does have both addresses. The mailing list itself does have both of the addresses, so it's,
okay, well, that may be the name of the
Yes, because
case.
18 is an abutter to 22.
but the top corner.
Yes.
When we
Yeah,
were
okay.
doing our.
We're not gonna
Yeah.
solve that.
But we're not,
I'm gonna wanna go home and have dinner.
yeah, so that's an issue to be resolved with a new application.
Let's try to move along.
So last thing I do want to say, I appreciate the conversation about the abutters list, and it'd be great to rectify that and to try to take next steps. I'm hopeful that we can talk more about the things on site that have been non-permitted, which are huge health hazards, which are huge safety concerns. And we're spending more time trying to give a leg up to the applicant when we're not actually diving deep into residents' concerns.
Since I was the one who used the term leg up, you are misinterpreting what I meant by that. What I meant by that was when we start the process anew, we have everything that we've discussed up to this point as a starting point. That's the leg up.
Okay.
It's not trying to make things, not trying to go easy on the applicant or anything like that. So I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstood.
Okay.
And
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else that wants to talk to us? Go for it.
Good evening, John Renzoni, 7 Jordan Terrace. Since the applicant isn't quite clear on whether or not he's going to proceed, I did have a couple of questions, though, if he does decide to proceed. You know, why are we looking to expand the contractor's yard? He already has an application for the contractor's yard. He's already stockpiling large quantities of materials on the contractor's yard. Why are we looking to expand the area? Are we looking to stockpile more materials, more soils? You know, that's a question that I have, because he already has a large amount of materials down there now. And it's quite a bit of truck traffic to move that material in and out.
Yep. Well, I don't know whether, well, if you want to comment, but, you know, they can
I have one
ask for any
question.
permit they want.
I did review your exhibit on the website.
Yes.
In your public comment. Did I give you permission to be on my land to take those photos?
I was on the right of way, which I
No, you were not. You trespassed on my land, therefore I'd like to ask the board to strike that exhibit from my application.
If we start fresh, we can deal with that.
Absolutely. And if you
I
trespass on my land
certainly
again,
don't-
I'll be seeking legal action.
There was no, first off, I was on the right of way.
Okay, no,
Well, no,
we're not.
Mr. Hassen, with all due respect, I mean, I'd like to just make the comment that I was on the right of way.
Okay.
And it also might be noted that that is a right of way all the way down Donahue, which we've also seen that you have the right of way. And that right of way goes all the way through to Wyman Gordon's property. That right of way is not supposed to be
Okay.
obstructed, am I correct?
You took a photo from the rear.
I told you I don't try to play a lawyer here.
I'm just saying, right now, that
And
right of
that's
way
the only
is
way
obstructed.
you know, first we gotta find out who owns what, and then, we can geolocate those photos.
Absolutely. You
No,
took
absolutely.
a photo on my property behind my building. That's no different from me going on your property.
I'm sorry. It's
Is your,
everything to the chair, not between the two people.
is that place posted as no
Yes, it is.
trespassing?
Yes, sir. It's gated as well.
Which is blocking the right of way.
If the gate's on his property?
It's a right,
Posted no
the right of
trespassing.
way.
Clear as day.
We're not,
Yeah,
no,
that's,
no.
We're getting way off track,
No.
I agree.
No, let's get to, what else do you have?
All right, so he's looking to expand the site. He's obviously looking to invest into the town. Is that correct? Yeah,
He wants a special permit from us.
right, because he obviously plans on running a contractor's yard for his business. Is that correct?
He wants to have a permit for a contractor's yard. I don't know what he's gonna do with it.
Well, I was just questioning then why the property is currently listed for sale.
A lot of people get permits for things like subdivisions and then sell them as soon as they get their permits. So, you know, but that's not, you know, I understand what you're saying. but-
All right, no, I was just curious, you know, because he's investing all this time and money into it. I was just wondering why, if he's got the property up for sale, why he's looking to expand the site, you know, if that's any concern to the board.
Yeah.
And then something that you had mentioned, Bob, is the visibility issues, the berm issues. I did take a couple of elevations at the back of the houses on Hollywood. the sight line out of the back windows on those houses are anywhere between 12 to 14 feet above the existing grade of their backyards, which some of those are also higher than the 398-foot elevation that is at the property line. So that would put some of the elevations at between 410 to 412 feet of elevation sight line out of the back windows of these houses. With the berm at 398 with a 6-foot fence, that puts it at 404 feet. So you have a 6 to 8 foot overlook into this area that you're going to be seeing from the back of these houses. That was just something that no matter what we do with the plan, if this site plan stays the same, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, well, that's why I need cross sections that show me. I understand engineering drawing, and I understand how to look at this, and that's why I want to look at it, because that's going to help me decide about compatibility, how much screening, that sort of thing.
Right. And just as a point of order, I didn't get the name of the other gentleman here that presented.
Vito Colonna.
Oh, okay, very good. Yeah, I didn't get that. He didn't.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, I thought it was you. I wasn't sure.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karen Merrill. I'm at 15 Hollywood Drive in North Grafton. And my question is, the site plan that you are proposing now without the building is the same size, right, as the original one? I'm sorry, I know I'm supposed to address you, but I'm kind of addressing both of you. How many vehicles are you expecting to have on a site that size without this 12,000 square foot building to maintain the vehicles compared to what you have today? So I'm wondering, essentially, because that impacts traffic, it impacts everything. So I'm just wondering, how many vehicles are we talking about here?
I think we're going to address that in the next application.
Right, that'd be in the new
Yeah.
updated traffic study.
Yeah, we get to that, we should get to that in the traffic study. This one will be a tricky one because I don't know what the manuals give you for generated traffic, but
Yep.
there's a whole, I don't know whether to call it a science or just an engineering process that assesses this stuff, and when we get to that, we'll all have a chance to look at it and ask questions about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think, just to sort of reiterate a point that this proposal here has changed quite a bit from what was originally submitted. And so a fair amount of what we've talked about has become kind of irrelevant. I mean, it would really be helpful for us to start with sort of the new plan and a reasonably complete description of what is going to be taking place in terms of the question you just asked about the number of vehicles stored, the various activities that are being proposed, ultimately leading to some estimate of the traffic that it will generate, the sight lines, which that part of it is kind of the same, but as Bob had noted earlier, more information, extending the site, the elevation farther onto the houses on Hollywood Drive would be helpful. So I suspect, and I don't want to put any thoughts in your brain or words in your mouth, but I suspect that the applicant is getting a pretty good sense of what the board's going to want to look at. And it really kind of starts with a more complete and updated explanation of what is now being proposed as opposed to what was formerly proposed.
Right, but without the building, I would assume there's more room for trucks, and with more trucks, there's more traffic, et cetera. So that's why I was
We'll all
asking.
get that, talk about it and ask about it if we do this, if we go around and start fresh.
Okay.
Yeah, and the board will definitely want to know those answers before we vote, or we would close the hearing. So that's,
Yeah.
one way or the other, we're gonna.
And no doubt if we start over again, you'll be here to be sure the questions are asked.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I think probably most of the abutters have become aware of this, even not having been properly notified, but among other things, a new process will start with a complete abutter notification.
Yeah.
Oh, not on Hollywood Drive. People don't talk to one another on Hollywood Drive.
No.
Is that right?
I have some friends, well, I had a friend, and I have some friends right next to where he was on the west side, west side. Jim,
Yeah, no, I think,
Audrey and Bob.
I think an application with an incomplete butter notification is probably not even acceptable as a complete application.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that notice is inadequate. I think we're pretty clear that notice for this process was inadequate. And if we were to close the hearing now, we'd have to say no just because the whatever you do with an invalid hearing, invalidly noticed hearing. So.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Good.
Thank you, sir.
Well, what do you want to do at this point?
We're gonna withdraw
You're gonna ask us to
without
allow you to withdraw without prejudice?
Yes.
Okay, you'll want to send that in writing
Yeah,
to.
we'll send a letter in.
Yeah,
Formalize it in writing. Shall we assume that the request has been made and will be received in writing?
I would be willing to make a vote with that presumption.
I think I just heard a motion and I'll second it.
Sure.
to grant the request,
Yes.
withdraw without prejudice. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
I just have one quick question if it's allowed.
That helps me as well as the world.
So I appreciate everyone's time. What would happen to all of the uploads to the site? Would those get erased, or would we have to do the whole thing again?
They are preserved.
They're preserved.
They'll be there.
Transferred over.
I won't guess how we'll connect a future application with the material that, on this go round, but it'll be, assuming the computer gods are on our side, and we're working on that as we speak, on the IT of it. That the intent is that it would be all there.
Okay.
I think.
All right. Thank you.
I think everything that has been submitted up to this point would be at least useful as background information for a new hearing.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, we do have Natalia's hand up.
We do.
Oh, go for it.
I think I heard Mr. Davidson take a vote.
On approving a withdrawal.
He hasn't been present for all of it, so I don't think he can vote.
He can't approve he can't vote on a decision on the special permit. He can participate in what we're doing. Our associate, even when not designated, can and often has in the past participated in the discussions and whatnot. In any case, you still have enough votes, even if you don't count his.
Yeah, I don't believe a vote to accept the request to withdraw. That doesn't, that's to grant. That is not in the same class as a vote on the special permit decision. It's not the same type of vote.
Well, I'll let you guys worry about that one, and we have enough votes to grant even without his vote. So you needed something to keep you busy tomorrow, didn't you?
Yeah, I know. Otherwise, Fiona and Natalia were just going to take the day off tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Not a chance, right?
She can't conceive of that
concept.
Okay.
Exist.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again.
Yeah, you're all welcome to stay for the rest of this fascinating agenda, but if you leave, please do it quietly so we can do our job.
Yeah, we don't have a whole lot more business.
Well, no, we don't.
We have some.
We have some. Bills,
I move we approve them.
Second.
moved in second. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Without any. Quiet, please. Quiet, please. Quiet, please. Outside. Moved and seconded. No discussion anymore.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkataraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Aye. Motion carries. Minutes of previous meeting. We have what, one meeting?
We have one. And two comments or questions. Where did I put that? So under action item C. Action item C, the 88 Merriam and 48 Meadowbrook roads. I believe that the actual purpose of the A&R was a land swap, not a land sway. And under public hearings, item B, which is the A&R plan for 62 Wesson. The minutes don't record a vote having been taken, but if I remember correctly, the board did vote to that an approval was not required and all the usual wording.
Agree.
All right.
All right. I'll move that we approve the minutes as drafted and with the changes from Mr. Robbins.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Venkataraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Staff report.
Alright, so I'm gonna be, I feel like I always say I'm gonna be short and sweet, and then I start babbling on, but I actually will be short and sweet because it's been a long night. So we have been swamped. That is definitely, between, its focus really has been concentrated more on technical assistance to applicants, public inquiries, site visits, commenting on projects circulated by other departments, regular meeting and planning board prep in general, decision drafting, obvious things. So that has really taken up the bulk of my time. But in between that are special projects, which have been moving along quite well. We had our housing production plan workshop the other day, a good turnout, roughly, I believe there's 28 people. We gathered a lot of interesting feedback that will drive the vision and the goals for the plan. So we are working with Karen Sonnenborg on that, and the next step will be the second workshop, which will speak more to the nitty gritty, really starting to get into feedback on the analysis and action steps. We did talk about action steps briefly at the workshop and kind of the priorities that we'll be pursuing, but I think we're going to do a deeper dive later on in the summer. Master plan has been going along very well. We have 24 interested folks folks that have been appointed to the master plan working group. I have 3 others that have reached out to me but missed my original deadline. So, but all of them have been very interested, and I don't foresee any issues with getting to 27, which is fantastic. It's almost as much as the first master plan. We have 405 responses on our survey. That's starting to become a bit stagnant, so I'm working with CMRPC to try and get some more feedback. With that being said, I think we'll be advertising it at the farmers market on June 21st, 2 to 6 p.m. We will have a booth. CMRPC will be staffing it for the entire time. I will be there as well, but I cannot dedicate the whole 4 hours. I know I am keeping track of folks who are saying that they're going to be there, and Natalia and I are will be cognizant of that and post meeting, should be required. Mill Street Park, I've spoke to CMRPC. Upon our kind of discussions and at the last planning board meeting and some follow-up research that needs to be done. They're going to present their findings at a later date. That project is going to be relatively close to closing out soon. So I just want to bring that to the board's attention, that we should try and nail down some consensus going forward. The next major thing, I have a meeting regarding Wi-Fi hotspot installation, which was an action item in our local rapid recovery plan. We're looking at spots in town where this is feasible, given the infrastructure and other requirements that we need to have in place. I will be meeting with the IT committee with the economic development coordinator tomorrow about this. We're looking at places where this is obviously can be brought in easily, because we only have a limited budget in terms of ARPA funds. So we're doing, we're obviously utilizing the path of least resistance first, hoping to get some good, have a good discussion tomorrow night. It has been grant application season. I applied for many, including an underutilized property program grant for Bullock, for a vacant property in Bullock Plaza, a community planning grant for the economic feasibility analysis as part of MBTA communities. I looked into a wayfinding grant for the town to help direct, to kind of improve and make more cohesive our wayfinding toward Grafton Common, which is one of our most popular areas and obviously our historic district. So put an application for that. Obviously we're continuing to work on the mill overlay work. Our temporary hire, who has been helping us out, finished today. That went very well. We had her for about a month. She got us up to speed on things that we needed, and we last but not least, we had a 40R application come in today for 75 Millennium, formerly known as 5 Millennium. They're looking to expand, modify the North Grafton Transit Village Overlay District regs by adding a subzone. So we have the language in the subzone there. They're looking to expand that. We just received the application, so now we need to get the approvals from DHCD, formerly DHCD, now Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, and then we will need to go to town meeting. This is obviously a long road, but we did get that application. There was a lot of discussion between the Claremont Company group about what route they were going to go. For a long time, it looked like it was going to be 40B. There was a discussion of 40R, then it kind of went away, and I think that now that they have decided on their final avenue, and that is the route they're going to go. So buckle up for that one.
If I may comment on that,
Sure.
Someone had asked me if I had heard about any talk about making that a 40R.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't,
Mm-hmm.
but I was speculating whether we would create it would be proposed as a new 40R or as a subzone B in the existing one.
Yeah, I think the subzone B strategy is clean, and it makes it makes the entire process. It's just the logical way to do it. So it is exciting. It's a great area, great parcel, and I think it's logical.
It's a good fit.
It's a great fit. It really is. Last but not least, we have been meeting with Tufts about the Grafton Science Park pretty regularly. They are working with Mass Development to make progress on that parcel. Obviously, the town doesn't have too much sway. We're really kind of there to be like the liaisons between Mass Development and Tufts, but the conversations are going well, and we're waiting for an update from Mass Development about the next steps for them. And
That's where exactly?
the Grafton Science Park. It's
The sound.
yeah on
Discovery Drive.
Thank you. Yes.
And the ask is,
They are, so bear with me because I think that this has been a conversation that's been unfolding for a while. So all of the nuances that were involved, they are looking to bring in more uses, and I believe they're trying to bring in more kind of green industry, etc., and I believe lease the property. I'll have to confirm. Actually, I don't want to get this wrong. I will follow up with that, but it's been kind of an ongoing conversation about who's going to be the leasing agent. Is it going to be Tufts and Mass Development, etc.? So yeah, I will follow up though, because it's actually that's a there's a lot of nuance there, and I just want to make sure I get it right. So yeah, other than that, I think that's that's the long and short of it. There's probably some things that I'm missing, but right now that is my report.
One question I have is just, different subject, but have you heard of any new movement on 8 Pine Street in any way over the last month or two, roughly kind of timeline?
I have not. I was contacted by DCAM, who is involved because they own by state hospital properties across the Commonwealth. They had inquired, and the gentleman that contacted me was kind of reporting out to his team at DCAM, but other than that, there hasn't been any information, unfortunately.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Correspondence. If anyone has any.
Correspondence. Not a whole lot of correspondence.
Nope.
So we probably don't have too much.
Nothing in there caught my eye.
Reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC. Anybody? I attended the annual meeting of the CMRPC last Thursday night. Thursday night. 60th anniversary, 60th birthday for CMRPC.
You check out the zoo?
We didn't get there in time for the zoo. We got a couple of tickets, though, under their deal, for going and checking. My wife did interview the ostrich, which was at the fence. The ostrich is taller than she is, and she's not that small. Anyway, that was fun to see. Anyway, good meeting. A lot of people there. Anybody else on that?
As the planning board's representative on the Open Space and Recreation Committee, I have one accomplishment to report. The committee has submitted an updated proposal for a trails committee to the select board. Last week, the select board approved that.
I want to put a trail up along the Great Meadow behind my property.
Yeah, so this trails committee, because trails in Grafton are predominantly owned and managed by the Conservation Commission and the Land Trust, this trails committee's role is essentially sort of coordinating between the two.
I have a question about that actually.
Hello?
Who is in charge of the trail behind the library, the one up in North Grafton? But that the Boy Scouts did.
I'm having trouble.
Don't know off the top of my head.
There's a tree down across the path.
Who's responsible for the trail behind the North Grafton Library?
There's a big tree came down across the path, and I wasn't sure who to tell about that.
Does it cross the Nelson property?
I'll say at least the trails that I know of in Grafton that I've actually kind of interacted with, most of them are tracked in the Trail Forks app that the Land Trust kind of primarily monitors. Mm-hmm. And you can report things like a tree across it in that app. So I think if the trail is in that app, that's a great place to report it. Alternatively, maybe contacting the conservation committee, the conservation agent in town would be a good reach out as well, just to let them know.
This is one of the reasons why the Open Space and Recreation Plan proposed that there be a trails committee to kind of coordinate information about trails so that
I bet that you could ask the land trust and they'd have a starting point on that. They're the ones that did the whole map of trails, isn't it? Aren't they?
Yeah.
There's a whole like I haven't done it, but I think it's interactive.
yeah, Trailforks is probably at least the one that I'm familiar
Right.
Yeah,
with.
and that's what Robert Aberg had worked on putting together efficiently.
Yeah, I believe also the Concom is working on updating their trail maps too, so I'll check in with them about that tomorrow.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. And Mara, you're definitely not re-upping. Is that true?
I'm not sure. It sounds like no one else has applied, so I'd feel bad leaving you out to dry. But I was on this board as a project while I was looking for work, and I found work. So I'm not sure how much time I have. Well,
Maybe
I guess
Congratulations. If there's anything,
yeah.
if there's any prospect for you to putting in to continue, I think talk with Fiona about it, because that process involves the selectmen and us having to meet. And I was just reading some of the provisions in the charter about how all this works. And it's a little fuzzy when it's two bodies doing it, but so that would be good.
Natalia's got her hand up.
Oh, Natalia?
Hi, I just wanted to mention that I had checked into what they would require if she wanted to still come back at this point to the board, is she would need to submit a letter saying she's interested in that, and then, like you said, both boards the selectmen and the planning board would then appoint her.
Yeah.
At this point, it's like as if she was applying new as opposed to being reappointed.
No, go ahead.
The reappointment process is done. She wouldn't be able to do that, but she can put in a letter to be appointed.
Right. I have no idea. We'd probably think she sends it to the select board, but I think since we're both appointing authorities, she probably should send it to both of us. Although I think we'll know either way. But it's it's coming right down to it, and we'd want to get to where we could act on that before our first meeting in July, if at all possible. So, if it's a possibility, good. Okay, is there anything else which may lawfully come before us?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. That's not debatable. Roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Davison.
Aye.
Mr. Veckatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassiter.
Aye, the motion carries. We are adjourned.